Welcome to the Kolbe Cast, episode 257. Thank you for joining us. Maggie, Hayden, and Nicole O'Connor are back today to continue our discussion of the implementation of Kolbe's classical education. Whether it's grammar and rhetoric, or integrating history, literature, and theology, Maggie and Nicole provide us with the reasons behind the curriculum and the encouragement to make it work for our students. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Today we're picking up where we left off in episode 256, where we were joined by Maggie Hayden, who is Kolbe's curriculum director and an instructor in the online school and homeschooling mom herself, as well as Stephen's wife, and Nicole O'Connor, who currently serves Kolbe as principal of the online school and who has taught various courses for Kolbe for a long time and in other schools over the years, and is a homeschooling mom herself. So we were discussing classical education at various ages and stages starting in kindergarten. They're back with us today to continue the conversation about the middle and high school years. So welcome back, Nicole and Maggie.
Thank you. Thanks for having us back.
Very glad to have you back. In episode 256, we laid some groundwork for classical education in the earliest years and the particulars of Kolbe's curriculum and how that is implemented. In episode 243, Stephen took us through some distinctions about classical and liberal arts education. So we'll link all these in our show notes, as well as episodes that come up along the way that are relevant to our conversation. So since we left off in 5th grade, that's the transition point moving into middle school. So Nicole, could you give us a sense of wrapping up elementary, heading into middle school, some kind of things to be aware of, think about, and look forward to?
Absolutely. So as we mentioned in the previous episode, elementary is really about building that love of learning and building the foundation in reading and also in background knowledge and different skills and content. And so now that they've been exposed to all of the amazing things, the world around them, the saints, we go from world geography to specific biographies to different, to American history in 5th grade. Now we're going to move into taking all of that foundation and expanding upon it and allowing, classical education is very much about following the developmental growth of the child and allowing that wonder to naturally grow with them, but then also for them to take each year and build upon it. And so now we head into middle school where, again, they'll cycle back through a lot of the same topics. They're going to have grammar and writing and their history. They'll have similar topics that they saw for the first time in elementary, but we'll be taking them even further and into further depth.
Yeah, that's really true. I was thinking about that 5th grade year. At the end of it, those students are starting to really do grammar more than just observation of grammar pieces, but really diving into the parts of speech and breaking down the parts of speech and looking at a sentence and introduction to diagramming. And in writing, if they're doing the classical composition program, which can be carried through the years, they've actually started writing, thinking about the parts of their writing, each sentences fitting into the paragraph, making sure it's all ordered and organized, and they're doing it for themselves for the first time. And that's carried through. And we've also just started them off in Latin. In the online program, many of the students have just had their first year or second year of Latin by the time they're getting into 5th grade. So they've definitely started to analyze more. So it really sets up that middle school.
Seems to me from my personal experience of what I can remember a long time ago when I was in middle school, and it has been quite a while now, but those were the years that I actually think I remember the most from. I remember being in class from like kindergarten through 4th grade or whatever, and sitting there and we did math and I was learning how to read, and I have vague memories of that. That's even further back. But those 5th through 8th grade years, it seems to me that's where like some of the science concepts, like I know how a siphon works because of things that were introduced to me in 5th grade. And I have these images of what life must have been like in the colonies because of great teachers and books and things that I read about that, or or the exploring of the New World when Spain was coming over, and um, so it seems like it's also a time, and you've got the kind of the you've now got the tools to play around a little bit almost at that age, and how wonderful that is. That for me, those are the things that stick then, because I just loved learning and exploring at those ages in a way that I wasn't able to do on my own so much, I think, when I was in the younger group.
Yeah.
I think exploration is a great word to describe middle school. Just there's so much curiosity. You take a high school teacher and you have them sub for a middle school class, and it's chaos, but it's such wonderful chaos. Middle school, I always say middle school is my favorite grades to teach. And it's because of how much is going on. There's the maturity levels are all over the map, but also students are for the first time really taking ownership and exploring, who do I want to be? How do I want to engage with this material? And really just starting to transition from that mom and dad are really guiding my learning, which we parents guide children forever, but just in the sense of, handing off a little bit and allowing the child to sit with their literature and really sit with their thoughts themselves. So I think literature is one of the big areas that we see this growth primarily in middle school, because it's very guided all the way even through fifth grade. I think, in fifth grade, they start doing book reports and they start doing a little bit of analysis. But when you get into sixth, seventh, and eighth, that's when they're really looking at the themes and the settings and, the different ways that the literature responds, how they're responding to the literature based on their personal experience or the virtues that they're learning at the time. So I always loved teaching literature to middle schoolers for that reason. And that's another area where integration of subjects is less common unless you're in a classical school. When you get to middle school, things tend to be very segmented naturally, whereas in elementary, even in your regular brick and mortar, they're in a contained classroom typically, or at home, it's easier to kind of everything blend together. And when you get to middle school, you really have to be intentional when you want the literature to integrate with the history and for the teachers to make those connections. And then theology, bringing the theology in, and math and science too. We don't want to leave them out, integrating those as well and tackling the topics in light of whatever that year's focus is. And so I think it's a unique time for the students, but also such a unique time of opportunity for homeschooling parents, because you can really chart a different course with your kids, especially starting in sixth grade.
Yeah. And those little, in those ages, I think one of the reasons literature is so key, and I think I would see that as one of the most foundational, that and grammar, they're like two of the most foundational things that you do with middle school students. And it's because they need to see that there's one worldview, one truth, one Christ. And if you don't, you can come at that so many different ways. They need to see it played out in every story. They need to see the reality and be able to reflect on that and integrate it all. So that's the place where the learning is can be naturally almost the most classical. And in other areas that are good, like the math and the science, we really want to keep the wonder alive there, but partially those subjects are to build habits and discipline. And our amazing online teachers, they do that with the students. We try to work that into our course plans too, but it's things like do your flashcards, write the words down, learn your multiplication tables if you haven't, practice this
Yeah.
more, do all these things. We're trying to give them the tools to be independent. And we're really
Yeah.
trying to push those. So you do both things. You give them the tools to be independent, and then you give them the experience that they lack naturally to see the integration of everything through literature. So
I love the regular references to grammar here, because grammar was not something I would have loved when I was in high school or in middle school. But once I was exposed to Latin in college and then going back and seeing how important that is, because how can you think well if you can't speak well? There's so many distinctions and things. So it seems like as you keep mentioning grammar, it just keeps, of course, that's important because we're trying to develop good thinkers, and you need to good thinkers. Is that the right? Anyway, students who think well, perhaps, and making those distinctions about or knowing what something we say actually means and making distinctions about, well, that word doesn't mean that, or this, speaking clearly seems to be really essential for that development.
Yeah. I really enjoyed being able to teach multiple levels through Kolbe. So when I started at Kolbe, I started in the English and Literature department and I taught sixth graders all the way up through 11th graders. So I got, oftentimes I would have students when they were little sixth graders in my classical composition and they were just starting to find their writing voice. And classical composition is so fun because you get to see, what words are they swapping out, what figures of description are they using, but they're just experimenting with your voice. They haven't developed it yet, but then you see them go through all the levels at Kolbe, and by the time they were with me in 11th grade in classical rhetoric, their voice was so strong and they were articulating things so well. And I think it's just a testament to the curriculum and also the instructors because you see them every stage. They're doing a lot of the same writing, that there's only so many different styles of writing, types of writing they do every year, but their confidence in their ability to articulate and their word choice and even just their confidence in what they're speaking about has grown so much by that time. So I think that the grammar is a huge piece of that. As you're saying, I also did not love grammar until much later when I learned how amazing and fun it was, especially to diagram. Once I found diagramming, I feel like it clicked for me. But before that, it was like a foreign language. It was very challenging. But seeing them build confidence through that, and then also finding their voice, and then using it to speak. So the best part about the rhetoric class that we do in 11th grade is it is a lot of paper writing, but also you're turning a lot of that into speeches and you're speaking in front of your peers or speaking in front of your family, or there's this push to share what your thoughts are or what your, a persuasive speech of sorts, and do it in a way that has logical backing. So you're not, you start, I think one of the example essays, I don't know if it's in that course plan or if it's just for online, but it's you were accused falsely of skipping out on your chores and you need to, defend yourself and plead your case. And the creativity that comes out of those assignments is pretty cool. But it's a safe prompt, right? It's a very easy prompt. We can all relate to not wanting to be blamed for not doing our chores, but then being able to use the tools they've learned to just run with it is pretty remarkable.
Uh, and they start that even younger. I was thinking as you were saying that, they're doing that right now in the classical composition too. In the second year of the online course, the students were actually asked to write an essay of that they made up on some funny topic that they wanted to do using the techniques. So they're practicing kind of separate from their book, making it their own for the first time, something that's like a totally unique thought. But then they were offered the opportunity to read it in class and present it. So while it wasn't required like it will be in 11th grade, definitely it's showing them that's where we're going, we want you to present it. And then those who wanted to present it could take it that step further there. So that was really, really fun to, and in the homeschool course plan, parents can do that with their kids too. They can get to those points and do something, say, here we're doing these every week, the same kind of thing. This week, just do something like it, but pick your own topic. There was really very little, it was get your topic approved, but it was really up to the students to pick it. And I think that's really good for practicing, articulating things in your own voice, learning how to do that. So that's something that's suited to older middle school students.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious about your thoughts on going with the stages of development, as you referenced, kind of middle school being sort of a whole new world in many respects. It can be there's a lot going on in middle school with each kiddo, and the change in the school structure kind of goes along with it. Is there anything more to that is relevant here?
Yeah, I wanted to have Nicole actually talk about something here that's come up a lot. So we've heard it. She and I have had this conversation. I think it's been really helpful. But there is we have so many offerings at Kolbe, so many different extra courses you could add on. And it's nice in the younger grades because it is all integrated. The teachers pick it. It's already kind of, especially in online, just here's the curriculum. But as you get here, we sometimes have you can add vocabulary programs, you can add literature, you can add classical comp, you can add voyages in English. There's a lot of different elements. And sometimes parents look at that and think that, well, does it matter? Do I try to do them all? The kids will they burn out? Are some more important than others? And there's some obvious ones like the vocabulary can be into you can do a separate vocabulary, but if you're doing literature, which is good, you'll get vocabulary exposure there and in the classical comp. But the writing has been something that a lot of parents have asked about. So I want Nicole to talk about that a little bit because she said such wonderful things about it. When do you do classical comp and when do you do the writing and voyages?
Yeah. Oh, it's writing instruction is something that everyone has an opinion on because there's so many ways to do it, right? And I think all parents too, you try programs and you have to find what works for your child. And some children are very eager to write right away, and some are not. And so I think to that same point about middle school being this kind of wild time where there's so many options. I think it's a very intimidating time for parents because it's a time where you're starting to really forge a path for your children based on their interests that are coming to light, based on strengths or struggles that have now really come to the surface. A lot of that is uncovered in the elementary years, but middle school, it tends to feel a little more daunting of like, oh, what math track are we going to do? Or are we going to do accelerated or this or that? And I think with writing, it's very it can be very simple because it's so naturally integrated with all the other subjects. And so for grammar, our Voyages program is fantastic for everyone to do grammar. And there's very good exercises that are very plug and play, and it's easily integrated with any other writing curriculum. So Voyages has a writing curriculum, and so that's what we use. And that's one option for students is that you have your writing and you have your grammar together. And those are very genre specific essays that the kids are learning. So they're learning a cause and effect. They're learning how to do a summary, how to write a letter. But the topics, you can have a lot more fun with the topics. There's a few topics in there, but that's an area where you can kind of you can customize, I guess. Even that Voyages curriculum is okay, they're writing a letter. One time we had them write a letter to their bishop or write a letter to their neighbor, or who are they writing to? What's the audience? And you can start guiding students. And for some kids that works really well and they like the regimen of that and they like that. Classical comp, I'm obviously biased because I taught it for many, many years, but it's so fun. It's such a fun way to get kids to love writing. And there's a creative element, but there's also a formula. So it works really well for students who are maybe hesitant writers too, or those who love creative writing, but it gets them to there's a pattern every week. They're writing the same thing, but it has targeted things that the students are changing. So when you start, you're reading fables, which is there's that beautiful classical element. There's fables and they have a moral to the story, and you're grasping the moral, and then you're finding a way to kind of change it and make it your own through stronger verbs or stronger adjectives or word choice or sentence structure or points of view. And so you're learning how to manipulate writing, which is very important later as well when you're having to edit or revise the millions of papers you write in college. But you don't even realize you're learning. Such a gentle approach, especially in the first 2 years. You can start as early as fourth grade. You can start as late as sixth or seventh with those first composition books. And the kids just feel like they're storytelling, but really they're improving sentence structure, they're improving word choice, they're improving grammar. And so I think it's a track that some parents are hesitant to dive into because it doesn't look the way a writing curriculum, if you walked into any school, would look. It's they're just reading stories every week. It seems very much like how are they going to learn what they need to learn, but it's also it builds as the years go on. So you start with those fables and those narratives, and they get comfortable with manipulating writing, and then you move to thought. So you move to crea maxim, where they're looking at a quote and they're thinking, what was meant by this? How do I expand upon this? What does this mean? How can I use this quote to teach about a scenario or something in life? And then you go on to confirmation refutation, where they're learning to see two points of view and argue those 2 points of view. So all the genres by typical name of like cause effect, persuasion, they're all there. They're not called the same thing. I remember the first time I opened the classical comp book, it was literally Greek because there's literally Greek words in there, but I was looking at it and it was Greek to me. I did not know. It was very shocking, and it was intimidating. And then as I started teaching it and diving into it and doing it with my own kids, I fell in love with it. So I think as far as when do you do voyages or classical composition, I think you, especially for homeschooling parents, find what you're comfortable with, but I really encourage exploring both options, and then find what your child responds to best, because you can have great outcomes with both. But like we said, integration in middle school is a creative process. It's not really set and done. And obviously our advisors are great at helping with that, and our course plans are great at articulating that, but it provides opportunity for meeting your child's needs and their excitement. What gets them excited about writing? Do that one.
Yeah, and just so people know, our course plans are really well set up for that. Even the paper course plans that we have for our homeschool parents, the composition, if you get the Voyages course plan, the composition is always on a set day. So if you're choosing to do that, it's all in one. But if you're choosing to add in the classical comp and replace the writing there, that's very easy to do. You have the two course plans and you just integrate that on the days where that you're not doing the composition. So it's set up to work well together.
Yeah, and you can change those for the Voyages course plans if you wanted to integrate history into a paper topic. That's easy to do as well. Right, Maggie? Do you want to
Yeah.
expand on that a little bit about that kind of customization?
Yeah, because the topics in that are so they give a list of suggested topics, but because it's, the main idea is like Nicole was saying, right, a cause and effect essay or something like that, using something you've read in history and bringing it over and into those courses is very easy. It's, you want the students to write about things that they actually know and are reading about. It gives them more matter to work with. So if you don't like, if you find the type of essay, you can say, well, you can do cause and effect very easily with what you read in history. There's even questions in the history book that, you know, suggest
Mhm.
that kind of topic. Or you can,
Yeah.
write a summary or an exposition and with their topics in mind, go to religion, explain how, you can see a virtue in the life of some saint. It's very easy
Yeah.
to do that. And we have worked that into our online acing courses. That's all there too. When they're giving topics, it's often tied into other material just to give them better topics.
I really enjoy this conversation from again, because we're talking about classical here as far as getting the right skills. You need these skills for the things that you're going to do, the different writing, the thinking well and such, but it's also bringing to mind like, well, why is Kolbe so complicated at times? Why are there two Englishes? Well, you're bringing in both what's right for the student, but also that self-activity, right? I mean, it seems like you're saying find what gets that child thinking for themselves, that they're interested, because then they're not just doing, mom says I have to do this, this, and this, so I'm doing it. Hey, I get to write this story about this, or I get to do this. So that self-activity is something we're always aiming for in a classical program. It's all built in there with the different options and the different paths, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then also, whatever you do, don't skip out on the literature. However you do it, even if you modify it, do not skip the literature because at the end of that, in eighth grade, they're reading the Song of Hiawatha, which is an epic. And it's laying the groundwork to prepare them to do what they'll be doing in high school literature. So if you follow through our literature, you will be getting the kinds of books that will actually prepare the student to read what we do in high school well, not to mention all the poetry in those middle school years. We have a lot of poetry too. It's intentional exposure to things that are going to prepare them for what they're going to see in high school and make them ready to read, the Iliad, the Odyssey, all those great works of literature. So, yeah.
I think we might have to have a separate episode at some point about the highlights of middle school literature and picking some of the great ones throughout there. There's so many good things there, but
Yeah, it's worth noting though too that there's a quite a wide selection and that it's not an expectation that you get through all of them. I see that come up from time to time. People are like, "Whoa, look at this song. Like, do we do all these books?" Well,
Something that I've heard a lot, a little phrase in reference to classical education is the much, not many approach, right? So I feel like in literature, it's the same thing as you can do fewer books and go into great depth with them, especially with that integration model. If you use a book as your spine for a writing assignment or for, maybe they do a speech or a character analysis, or you're integrating it with history. Not that you shouldn't read all the books that you want, but as far as the ones you study more formally, if you want to do the more in-depth kind of analysis and study of them, I think our course plans and the literature companions have so much more than you need. So you can do all of it, or you can, zone into a few and have a great year regardless.
And then plenty more to read outside of that when you.
Yeah, exactly. Keep going, read over the summer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, already I'm racking up Kolbe cast episodes that relate to this conversation that I'm thinking of adding to the show notes, classical composition being one of them. We have done classical comp here too and had good experience with it and mixed it with voyages, and that worked well for us. Let's head into high school now. So where's a good place to start?
Well, I guess we always start with religion.
Okay.
Theology, at this point, we call it theology in high school, and I think that is appropriate because up until this point, we've had textbooks to teach the doctrine because the students need that foundation of doctrine, the basic tenets of the faith. They need to know, what the sacraments are, all, what the virtues are, and all those things. They've been exposed to saint stories. But when you hit that ninth grade year, we do the greatest of all, primary source materials, the Bible, and we go through the Old Testament, and then we go from that the next year into the New Testament. And then we go into some of in the third year, it's really the doctrines of the church fathers up through the Middle Ages, and then kind of wrapping up in 12th grade with found the primary source material for the more modern era. Not some of it's really modern encyclicals that are recent, some is older encyclicals, and the focus of each year changes. So we have really lovely like Bible history, the sacraments. The second year focuses on the sacraments, and also some more of the Bible and some church history. And then the third year is the apologetics year, and the fourth year is more about morality. So it's topics that are suited to the students, but through primary sources that they have been prepared to read, both through literature and through theology and through the integration that they've had. And what they read and how the students respond to it is exactly what you want from a classical school. Reading there are some texts that we use in that, but it's primarily primary source materials all the way through. And the excitement of reading, like I'm thinking this year with one of my children, Ignatius of Antioch, Justin Martyr, Clement of Alexandria, reading and hearing what they said. That's like one of the highlights of education ever. You'll have as a parent. It's like the greatest thing when they come and say, "Isn't this the most exciting thing you've ever read?" Because it's not a textbook telling them that St. Ignatius of Antioch said this or St. Justin Martyr said this. It's them reading it and realizing the depth and the breadth of our church and our faith. And like, we want our students to come out of here knowing what the sources say, learning primary sources, and they're getting that in theology. So that is absolutely the highlight of the entire high school education. It's not the only thing that's classical, but it's the highlight. It's absolutely.
You can see it in all the subjects. So when you were mentioning, their third year is apologetics, and they're also doing classical rhetoric, and they've just done logic. And then in science, when we select our science curriculum, we're always looking for the best out there. And even if it does have harder topics to tackle, we're confident because of that theology progression that they experience and because of the teachers and the course plan that we can tackle those harder topics with church teaching and with the Catholic worldview and make sure that they are prepared for those harder apologetic conversations, or just being able to take what they've learned at Kolbe through the primary source reading, through the literature analysis and the literature readings, and then in science and math. Math, I feel like all the math they do all the way through the end, that's the self-activity lesson and the discipline lesson. There's so much there to challenge the students to grow in virtue and to grow in just a different way of thinking. It's very logical, obviously, but it's also there's still an opportunity to see God's design and to see the way the church has been an instrument in the progression of math from the beginning. So I was talking to a math teacher this morning, actually, and she was talking about how there's so many wonderful Catholic mathematicians and saints who were mathematicians who really laid the groundwork to be able to have calculus today, or to be able to have these wonderful math classes. And just, them having that background and knowing that, and being their exposure, their excitement about math is just off the charts. And then their idea of what that gift was from the church to the world is also understood and appreciated, which I think is very unique to Kolbe students. So
Yeah.
good to see.
Yeah. Right. And it really is, every year has a theme. The teachers have told me how they kind of chuckle when students say, you know what you're telling me today in history, it reminds me of what I was learning in literature the other day. Do you know that Mrs. So-and-so said this? It's like you kind of planned it. And they'll say the same thing about theology. Oh, we're also thinking about this. And it really is all integrated, so that that first year it's original source material of the ancient world. You're seeing the Greeks, you're kind of going through the struggles they had, at the same time you're looking at the Bible and the Old Testament. You're seeing what the world was like without Christ. What is the height that man can achieve? What's perfection in the ancient Greek world? How do you resolve the fact that we have how do you explain the soul? We tackled that with Plato. How do you, what is virtue? You kind of even see what, the desire for immortality with the Iliad and Odyssey, and how they interact with it. What role do the gods have? And who is the perfect, what is the perfect man before Christ? And you're looking at all of these questions, and then you get to the Romans, and they're all about justice in the second year. So it's like the human virtues, the virtues of the state. You're reading in literature the Aeneid. You're reading in history, you're reading Livy, which is really interesting, and you're seeing, what's good about the Romans and how they're taking this. You're seeing these virtues of the state, and it's all leading to Christ. So in that second year, you're seeing that in theology because you're doing the New Testament, and but it's at the time of the Roman world. It's at the founding of the church. So you're learning about the sacraments and the founding of the church, and you're seeing this is the answer. I'm hearing the answer. At the same time, I'm seeing that we need Christ. We need salvation. And then you have the incarnation, which is like the central event. And it's the moment about, that we as Catholics are supposed to go out and be a light to the world and share the good news that Christ has come and redeemed us. And so you then go into 11th grade and you see the post, Christ has come, the incarnation has happened. How did we respond to it? And you're doing that in history through the Middle Ages, seeing the issues they have to deal with. What struggles does the young church face, and then the church as it matures, how does she respond through what councils? You're doing that in theology with the councils and reading some St. Thomas, the Summa Contra Gentiles, and it's so wonderful to see that connection. And then literature too. You're getting all of that great Catholic literature that's a response. And you even see, you have the Song of Roland, for example, which is kind of the Catholic version in a way of the story of Achilles. It's maybe not as great in the way it's told, but it's meant to be a parallel. And then you get to that modern year and you kind of get to see the problems we have today and also how we deal with them and the morality, the modern literature, the ways things have changed. So it's really a beautiful integrated experience throughout history, theology, and literature all the way through. And the English supports it from the kind of classical grammar, ninth grade, and then working through some logic and writing up to the rhetoric course and then creative writing. So we have a really nice kind of tie-in all the way through with those subjects.
Really? Yeah.
One of the beautiful benefits that I've seen of Kolbe families is uh, the sibling growth as well. So talking about how when they have that biblical background or when they learn about the history, it uncovers, and you think about the dinner table conversations and you have kids in multiple levels kind of getting these different levels of exposure. And then the topics kind of naturally guiding together because we're a classical school and they cycle back. So you have your third grader who is just starting to talk about the saints and some of the key players in the church, but on a very surface level. And then you have your 11th grader who has uncovered some new meaning, through their apologetics class or through other classes, and then just the curiosity that sparks from that. So one thing I love about the Faith and Life series is that the scope is basically the same K through 8 in that like what they're learning lesson by lesson is the same topic, but the level of depth is different. So, the fifth grader and the third grader are talking like, hey, we learned about angels this week. Hey, we learned about angels this week. But then, what they have to contribute has more to be uncovered. So it's one of the beautiful parts about homeschooling in general. But I think when you see a classical school cycling through the same topics, but having that developmental growth, I think there's some fun and uniqueness there to the conversations that families get to have.
Yeah, yeah. And I just wanted to add too, these courses are so wonderful, but I hear some people say it just seems daunting to do, all of these rich courses in high school. And we do have foundations courses now, which cover all the key topics and core points. So it's really something that a family who's thinking, oh, that sounds great, but I don't know if I could do that, and I don't know how to cut this down. Our foundations program would be really helpful in giving them a way to do these core texts in high school in a more manageable fashion, especially for students who haven't done a lot of reading. If you've come in doing our Kolbe program all the way through, you're easily ready to handle these books. Even if you think your child isn't, they can do it. They'll surprise you. But if you're coming in and your child has not read and you're nervous about it, one of the things you could consider is doing the foundations courses because they will get the same conversations. Our goal is to have our whole student body all having the same rich education. That's where we'd like them to be.
So we have a lot of great stuff happening during the school year, but the summertime offers a lot of opportunity for continued growth and learning and rest. And one of the ways of accomplishing that is through the summer reading program, which has several components to it. So Maggie, you want to take us through some of that and tell folks how to find out more?
Yeah, so we have every summer we've been putting out a summer reading catalog, which is basically a list of great books with descriptions so that parents can see what the book's about. And it's by level so that you can pick books for your K to 2 child, your 3 to 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. This year it's Lives of the Saints, stories about saints and by saints. So we're really kind of diving into that this summer. So we have a great recommended list. It will come out and we'll have it on our website and we'll have links to, as we've had in past years, some, submit your own list, get a competition of sorts where students can submit the books they've read and get raffle tickets. And we'll also have some summer clubs that will be available too. You can look at our summer clubs and we have literature books that are available to discuss and they're tie in. Some of them will tie into this, but we really want to promote summer reading for students because it's a great activity. It's a time when they have the rest, as you were saying, Bonnie, to kind of reset and step back from all the school and the deadlines and just pick up a book and make a new friend by reading the book and just enjoy it. It's really lovely. So look for that catalog. It'll be out soon, and it'll be on our website, and we'll send out information to families, and there'll be a competition. And consider doing those summer classes with your student, especially the book classes. There are lots of great clubs, but working through a book with a group of students when it's just for fun is really a neat thing to do. And kids, when I've taught those in the past, the students have really enjoyed just jumping in and exploring a book just for the sake of learning.
Okay. And we'll have a link to that, to the landing page for the summer reading program in the notes for this episode. Nicole, do you have more you want to say, add to that on the summer side?
I think the only thing I'll add is that if you're considering classical education or intimidated by it or new to Kolbe, the summer classes are a really good time to dip your toe in because very low stakes. There's no homework or there's not a lot of stuff to do other than enjoy the curriculum and see what the classes look like. And whether that means, online classes end up being for you or you're more interested in traditional homeschooling and the curriculum itself, it's really good exposure to the Kolbe community, the students that are here, the approach to the books and to the curriculum. So it's a great way to get started. So just piggybacking off of what Maggie said, it's check out the summer reading list and those clubs, and it's a great start.
Well, this has been a great tour through all the grades and through how Kolbe approaches all of them. So as we're wrapping up, do you have any final thoughts or takeaways or other resources or recommendations that you want to leave with us?
I'd recommend to any family who thinks that who's on the fence about classical education or reading all the real books to just jump in and try it with your child because I can't tell you how many times as a homeschooling parent I've thought, oh, that sounds great, but my kid's not ready. Not now. That won't work for them. And 9 times out of 10, I'm surprised because they really are ready, and all they needed was the exposure. The books that we use, I've seen children get excited. Children want really good, beautiful, true material, and if you give them that, they will respond. And if you promote wonder with them and encourage them to see it as exciting, be there with them, learn with them, they'll be excited because you're sharing something truly beautiful. So I would just recommend to anybody who's on the fence, just jump in and try it. Don't go for the not classical books when you can read the real things, and just try those different courses. I think you'll be surprised. I know I've been surprised over and over, and I'm a believer in all of this and I've seen it, but I'm still surprised at how much the students can get out of it and how much they love it.
Beautiful. Okay. Nicole, you want to add anything to that?
I think Maggie covered it. That was great. Yes, absolutely. I think sometimes we can be our biggest obstacle and our own intimidation. I know I was working a homeschool conference, and when she found out Kolbe Academy was classical, she's like, I don't know about that classical stuff. And once we got to talking about it, she's like, oh, that's all it is. That sounds fantastic. And so I think sometimes we can overcomplicate what a classical education can mean, and it can feel more intimidating, but it's really it's going back to the roots of education, actually. It's the natural beginning of things. It was when we were, in log cabins reading books with our family, but it's more than that now, but it's very much back to basics. And so in a way, once you get into it, and this was something that surprised me as well, it's much more natural than it may seem. It's, you find yourself wanting to share, oh, this character did this. Why do you think they did this? Or looking, we have this natural desire to research, right? So we have like, oh, I wonder where that came from. Oh, let me, get out my phone and figure out where the origin was. And, when you have a classical curriculum, a lot of that research is done for you. You're looking at a lot of where it came from. And so I think that's all I'd add is that if you're intimidated, remember that we're not going forward into these new crazy ideas. We're going backwards into the start and into the way things have been for a very long time.
That's all very well said.
Yes, and it's perfect because, God made us to know him and love him, right? So our intellect has to develop, our will has to be aligned so that we can love God. And the classical education is basically just let's help that process, the natural process of man coming to be able to think well and to love God well through all of these different things. And so you're just being exposed to the beautiful, you're ordering things, you're developing. So yes, it's the right thing to do. It's the start. It's the right way to go.
Well, thank you for the inspiration you have given us to keep going or to undertake it for the first time. So again, our show notes are going to have a long list of links. So head there to check out more of what we've been talking about today. And Nicole and Maggie, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Chief.
Yes, thank you.
Subscribe to the Kolbe Cast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.